Oh, parties, instead of dying, so line to the merchant ship. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, but my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward to this generation triumphant. Won't you help me sing the songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption song, redemption song. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves will free our mind. Have no fear for atomic energy, for none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets, while we stand still and look? Some say it's part of it. Go fulfill the book. Won't you help me sing the songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption song, redemption song. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves will free our mind. Have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can change the time. How long shall they kill our prophets, while we stand still and look? Some say it's part of it. Go fulfill the book. Won't you help me sing the songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption song. All I ever had, redemption song. The songs of freedom, songs of freedom. Songs of freedom. That is Bob Marley with his beautiful song, Redemption Song. Tells us a lot about freedoms and things you have. Don't take them for granted, you know. But don't be intimidated by atomic energies, you know. They cannot change the course of time. You know, it tells you. Today we're going to continue with our program, you know. I reached where I was talking about Hegel and the philosophy of language. We're going to continue from there. Just give me a bit of time to put this guitar out, and then we're going to continue. Just give me a bit of time. I'm going to put it down. And then we're going to continue with our program. I hope you're enjoying it. But knowledge, knowledge is something you're going to strive to get it. So this is what I'm trying to do. Those people who listen to me, they might get some knowledge about how things happen, And now I'm going to go into the details of how Hegel looks at the philosophy of language. Those who have studied Hegel, I don't have to go into the details of Hegel because it's somebody we looked at, in detail from part 1 to even part 26. If you look at my series, you'll see that I've covered that ably. So if you need to understand how human beings get knowledge through acquiring consciousness, it's a dialectical thing. And Hegel has it beautifully done. He says that before you even realize this is a tree, that's where you start, sense certainty. And he tells us the sense certainty issue is what makes us acquire the first instances of knowledge, universal laws, the entities which are indeterminate. They are hidden way out in they are hidden way out in the environment. And for us to know them, we have got to decipher. We got to first have a perception. From a perception, we go to perception. Then we go to things like intuition, cognition, perception, understanding. And then we come to start thinking as human beings. And Hegel is one person that, using the consciousness, goes further to acquire the understanding of Geist, the spirit. Because consciousness to Hegel is the road to spirituality. He's revered in theology because he's the one who actually gives the faith. The Western spirituality is so much founded on Hegelism because he believes in the Supreme Being, that as you're acquiring consciousness and accommodating the others and agreeing that you're a finite being, that one day you will have to meet your maker. He establishes the issue of Supreme Being. And this happens all dialectically. Negation and agreement, positive, negative things happening and reconciling. Thesis, antithesis, and then you get an answer to something. And you have seen that in discussing Richard Rorty and the book he wrote about the philosopher and the mirror of nature, for him to come to a point where that philosophy of language is the most essential thing, he had to go through these philosophers of the West, because they at one time also touched that language. Nothing transcends language. And it is very, very important for us to conceptualize properly that fact. Aristotle, he says language is used for the essence of understanding being. He agrees. But Aristotle, as I said, and I'm not going to repeat myself, the living and the dead were kinsmen. So the spirits could come and participate in daily lives of the Greeks. That's the most interesting concept. And just to continue so that our program links very well, so that we don't deviate so much, because already we have done about 10 minutes. You remember I touched about the word spirit in German quotes is Geist, becomes conscious through language, history, and culture. For you to understand a spiritual aspect of our universe or our being, you got to use history and language, and then a culture. And all this, once you have all those three aspects, language, history, and culture, the people decipher a supreme being within that dialectics. They discuss among themselves. And they start to kind of conceptualize that there must be some powerful entity that guides them. That is a controversial issue, but many people have agreed that there is a supreme being, because if you look at the wonders of the world, the cosmos, and how organized it is, your sunrise happens at a certain time and sunset happens at a certain time. The rains come in March, April, in places that the tropics, and then they come again around August, September, and then you have almost up to December you're having rain. Then the winds come at a certain time. The harmattan, the monsoon winds, they all come at a certain time. And so in that entity itself, just that essence, so timed, the stars, come out at night. So the human beings, just by that power which dominates them, because you plant your crops at a certain time, and that is all determined by the movement of the cosmos. So you start to see that spirituality. So Hegel agrees with that. Words are not fixed. That's Hegel now. Their meaning evolves historically. For example, freedom meant something different in ancient Greece compared to today, because the spirit has developed. Freedom is a spirit. It has developed. Roti, now, who is our main subject, he is actually the center of this discussion that I'm having. Because after he wrote that book, Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature, in 1979, the philosophers and most of the postmodernists and pragmatists, they started to view philosophy as based as a science of being. And it's not search for truth. Philosophy is not at the center of knowledge. Language is. Nothing transcends language. And that's Roti's idea. But it is also perpetuated by many philosophers who came before him. But we had not deciphered them until he came along and perpetuated the idea that language is at the center of our knowledge. Rorty, in quotes, and later thinkers like Heidegger and Wittgenstein agree with Hegel. Language evolves with the historical context. It's not static. Meaning shifts with the movement of cultures, practices, and social needs. And that is Hegel. Now we go to Heidegger himself now, because Heidegger also was covered immensely by Rorty. But it's good for me here now to say that even when these people are writing all these things, and they are almost concurring that language is at the center of our knowledge, the indigenous people who are also at the center of my discussion were also thinking deeply and analyzing things within themselves. The ones who had become educated following the standards of the West, they became proficient in speaking English. They started reading deeply in the archives of the West to see what do they say about them and what does knowledge say about human beings and how they acquire knowledge. So there were people like Sheikh Anta Diop, Joe Jomo Kenyatta, Julius Nyerere, Senda Senghor, Langston Hughes, Frederick Douglass, William Bladen, V.S. Mundibe, Ali Mazrui, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, people like W.W. Du Bois, Kwame Appiah, Alexis Kagame, John Beatty, Odera, Kotpe Pipitek. All these people are going deeply into books, into things in archives, and they're trying to dig out. Were Africans really a clean tabula rasa that the West had to cultivate so that they have knowledge? Because previously none of them knew that there were medicinal plants, great astrologers who studied heavenly bodies. They built very well elaborate, they had architectural understanding, and they built structures which were up to standard for their living in. The agriculture, they did husbandry, they domesticated animals, they domesticated plants, so that they had things like corn, beans, peas, millet, sorghum. They had all these knowledges with them, and it all was retained through oral traditions. Because once the indigenous people were found out that they had comprehensive, very well elaborate languages, it was obvious through Rorty's writing and people who came before that if you had a language, obviously you are able to acquire knowledge. Nothing transcends language. And so what I'm doing is that I am just picking the Western philosophers, because at this point we are trying to look at them and the philosophy of language and to see did they concur that language was the most important thing to have for one to be able to acquire knowledge. But at the same time, there are other factors in the environment that helped the acquisition of knowledge. For example, your health was very important in you being able to acquire knowledge. Sometimes you needed to be healthy and you could think properly. So if you are ailing for some reason, sometimes the conditions of your health determined how much knowledge you could acquire. But those are very, very minor and kind of, on the side. They're on the peripherals of language. Nothing transcends language. Now let us see what Heidegger, in his book Being and Time and later writings, focuses on being, in quote, Sein, S-E-I-N. Being is Sein in German, and language, Sprache. Language is the house of being. That is Heidegger now. You can see that's a powerful statement right there. That language is the house of being. We don't use a language. Language uses us. It reveals or discloses being. Traditional views like, in quotes, Aristotle's categories or Leibniz's calculus cover up being. They decipher being. Example, when a craftsman speaks of good wood, his words come from lived engagement with materials, not abstract definitions. When you bring out a beautiful statue from a piece of wood, it's from experience. Might be you attended an institute where you are taught how to use different chisel, for example, carving tools, and how you bring out a statue from a piece of wood, and what kind of piece of wood you're going to use. All that comes from knowledge acquired through language. It's not just an abstraction definition. No. Roti, we're doing a comparison with Roti now. We were doing Heidegger. Heidegger agrees that language is the house of being. So Roti is deeply influenced by Heidegger. He agrees that language does not mirror reality. He also rejects the idea of a pure representational language. Language is bound with our being in the world. Now, as these arguments continue from Aristotle, Descartes, Immanuel Kant, Hegel, Leibniz, also the Africans are also being studied by different people. As I said, there come people like Placide Tempos in 1945. He writes a book about the Bantu philosophy. He's a Belgian theologian in Central Africa, in Zaire, Congo, Belgian Congo. And he writes about the Lula people. And he says they have a very comprehensive system of knowledge. They have a very elaborate language that they use to analyze, to determine, and to analyze indeterminate things within sense of certainty, universal laws. And he discovers that they have ample knowledge about things. Architecture, they build beautiful structures from materials of the environment for them to live in them. They cultivate a plant. They are very knowledgeable about wild plants and what can be eaten and what cannot be eaten. They domesticate different species of animals. They understand medicinal plants. They understand the cosmos. They are aware of a supreme being. Their spirituality is very well rounded. And in this book, he kind of, the only thing that Palace Temple can be criticized is that he wanted Christianity to be the spirituality that the indigenous people had to express their values through, using French. But he understood they had a language of their own, but he did not believe that they should retain their languages to perpetuate what he had agreed they have. They had oral traditions, which they never called it that philosophy, the science, the study, the science of being, because that's the West understanding that anybody who could acquire knowledge could only do it through philosophy, which was their strength. They had to philosophize as the Greeks did to understand themselves. And they thought everybody should follow that route. But Rorty comes and says, no, you don't have to see your self-awareness does not have to be based on philosophy, the science of being. No. The only thing necessary is language. Nothing transcends language. Even for philosophy to explain itself, it had to use language. So all the other things became secondary to language. And somehow, Palace Temple, let's say Lucien Levy Bruegel, almost at the same time, Marcel Grauel, all these were French philosophers, because West Africa was very much a sphere of the French people, French colonizers. Some of them completely said the Africans had an irrational kind of behavior. They didn't have a method of values that they could consider equivalent to those of the West. So those two, apart from Marcel Grauel, who studied the Dongons, the Ntongomele of Sierra Leone, of Senegal. They were great astrologers. They studied the heaven bodies. It is even thought they are the ones who helped Christopher Columbus to navigate from West Africa to South America, because they knew how to read the stars of the heavens and let them direct them when they were sailing in the ocean, the Pacific, to lead them to the Mayas, the pyramid of the Mayas. They had gone there many times, the Dongons, or Tongomeli. And Marcel Grauel, although it is said he might have influenced the research, he's the one who brought out the knowledge of the indigenous people of Senegal, which were of very high classic, almost rivaling the Greeks. But that's a discussion for another day, because these things are controversial. People want for others to hold the indigenous people of especially developing countries to have been ignorant when the colonizers arrived. they don't want people to say, oh, we found these people, and if we had left them to themselves and not destroy their values, because they destroyed a lot of African cultures, the history, the languages, and somehow we destabilized some of the areas of the Africa. And there is some belief, and people concur, that development could have been very different if people of the West, when they arrived in the indigenous people's places or territories, they just left them the way they were, kind of helped them to come out from, behaviors might be which were against development, but leave their languages intact. The things could have been very different, because Africans might be in the postmodern era, could almost be catching with the West, because if you look at the Chinese, who were less colonized, and the Japanese, I hate to go into that topic because, people say, oh, people are different. But maybe we would be in the same levels. But that is spilled water. So Roti says he also rejects the idea of a pure representation of language. Language is bound up with our being in the world. There is no pure representational language. No. Language is bound with our being in the world. Now, we leave Heidegger and visit with Wittgenstein. And here I'll be winding up the discussion again, because sometimes if you make a discussion too long, sometimes you tire people. So I like just a discussion to be just enough so you can digest. Wittgenstein is almost at the same time with Kenyatta, 1889, 1951, because Kenyatta was born around that time, because when he went to London, he wrote the book Facing Mount Kenya. He's also in the argument. Padmo, Padmo, W.W. Du Bois, Aimé Césaire, Fanon, they are arguing out the dying colonialism. They are writing. They are trying to see, is language the most important thing, or is it philosophy? And what role does philosophy play universally in getting people to be conscious, aware, and educated, and acquiring of knowledge? What was so important? And people like Ludwig Wittgenstein, they kind of vindicate us. Later, in 1979, they help Roti to arrive at language is the most important component of knowledge. Ludwig Wittgenstein, in his book Tractatus Philosophicus, he discusses about language games. Because Wittgenstein looked at human life as a game. They were playing a game using language. And the games they were playing using language had rules. First he thought of tools and pictures, but he negated that later. He went to the game idea that language, no matter what language you have, it has got rules. And the rules of Kikuyu and English are different. And the rules of biology and physics are different. So language is a very intricate component of acquisition of knowledge, and it all depends how do you use the rules for the language. Okay, early Wittgenstein was still logical atomist, believing in a neat correspondence between language and the world. Language mirrored the world. So you remember the book Roti wrote is Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature. There was this belief that language mirrors nature. Sometimes not true, because if it mirrors nature, it means it will mirror a perfect, a pure world. But nothing is pure. And language is not even 100 or even 87% correct on what it is trying to bring out. There were flaws. So there are paradigm shifts. Thomas Kuhn comes with his scientific revolution, says knowledge comes in increment of small bit, kaizen. And paradigms change. You might believe in this paradigm today, and tomorrow you negate it. Wittgenstein, in quotes, in Philosophical Investigations, which is one of his writings, completely changed his mind. Language doesn't mirror nature. Language is a set of games with rules based on social practices, meaning, equal, use. Meaning of a sentence defined properly with all its essences. It means a meaningful sentence is useful to human beings advancing their understanding and bettering their life. There is nothing in meaning beyond that. Meaning is not searching for truth. That's a discussion for another day because it's controversial. Sometimes it's the basis of spirituality of many a people. That human beings' purpose is to search for truth, and that truth is based on some writings or beliefs written and documented in scripts that we are all searching for truth, and in doing that we are praising a supreme being. It's very controversial. But here I am not going to that. I want you just to see, language, nothing transcends this. And if you see the truth in that, using truth as the basis of understanding nothing transcends language, then we have discussions to do as we live in this world. Example, if I say, I promise, that is not describing an inner state. It is doing something, participating in a language game. Promise is a language game. It's not an inner state of the mind that, promise was there and I have made it. No. It's a language game. You have promised. There are rules of how you promise. You're going to keep it, and you're going to give somebody something, or you're going to say something good to somebody you have promised them. You promised them a price. So it's like that's where you base law of contract. John Rawls, a theory of justice, the guru from Harvard Law School. They were in the same department with Charles Githere, the great guy who gave us how reparations will be done. God keep him in a nice place in heaven. He passed on. I think I need to be corrected. Yeah, he passed on about 2 years ago. Comparison now, Roti and Wittgenstein. Roti loves Wittgenstein's later views. Language is not about describing facts, but about doing things together. We are not just describing things, we are doing things together. Cultivating the land, irrigating the land, going to the moon, using AI to better knowledge. You know, that's what we are doing. There are people building better planes like Boeing. We buy planes and we use them to transport people. We human beings are involved in communal things. And all is about social credit. Nothing more, nothing less. Useful things. If you innovate useful things, you help us. We are not searching for truth in this program. We are bettering human lives. And that's what Roti brought out. And some people didn't like him. Some called him a rational, a relativist, that he thinks there are different centers of truth, there are different centers of knowledge, and he's giving praise to people who have never even made a wheel of a bicycle. You know, Hegel despised the indigenous people. I am using his discussion not from a political point of view, because if you go into politics, some of the people I'm using as reference, they are questionable a lot. But that's not my issue here. It's just that language is the most important thing in acquisition of knowledge. Nothing transcends language. And Roti says, no final language will capture reality. We just keep playing different games. We are not searching for the ultimate absolute reality. No. Life is a language game. Life is a game. You got to survive in it. And that is what Martin Heidegger, after he also concurred that language, nothing transcends language. Then he discussed the philosophy of being as a search for entities which make us beings. Perception, apperception, cognition, intuition, concepts, understanding, thinking, semiotic of symbiose of semiotics, firstness, secondness, thirdness, semiosis of semiotics by Charles Sanders Peirce. All those are just, we are trying to help human beings improve their livelihoods. We're not searching for reality. Because if you look at Jacques Bourriard, simulacra, language is going to take us to postmodernity. The language game is going to take us to postmodernity. And in postmodernity, reproduction of signs and symbols using language is what is going to become so important. That's another discussion. Jacques Monod, chance and necessity. Now we go to another important person, because you must be convinced that many philosophers of the West helped to bring the idea forward that nothing transcends language. because I have quoted. Now you can see Ludwig Wittgenstein, who was in the group of the Vienna Circle, where there was Bertrand Russell, Carnap, Whitehead, Charles Sanders Peirce, wrote himself, Heidegger, all those people, they concurred that language was the most important thing. But at times, language can also be put into formulas. For it to be more effective, you can use formulas, axioms, maxims, to now bring it computation of Leibniz. That's another topic. And AI is an advancement of language into another level where it becomes so useful, so thorough, using deremption, subulation, antiphaser, and nanotechnology, cybernetics and robotics. That's a language which we can go into it, but that's for later. Then there comes Bertrand Russell, Edmund Husserl, 1859, 1938. You can see he's almost at the same time Palsy Temple, Jomo Kenyatta, Frederick Douglass, W. Du Bois, Aimé Césaire, Frantz Fanon, Amira Baraka. We can say they are contemporaries. They borrow from each other. Joachim, Senda Senghor, Amika Cabral, and people like Jacques Derrida, Marx, Karl Marx, all these people, Sheikh Anta Diop, Edward Jeffries, Amira Baraka, James Baldwin, all these people are actually Padmo, George Padmo, Ali Mazrui, all these people are struggling to answer this question that I'm dealing with now. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, professor. Husserl founded phenomenology, study of structures of consciousness from the first-person point of view. Language expresses intention of acts of consciousness direct towards objects. Essences, in quotes, elendos, that's, I think, Latin or Greek, are still important for Husserl. He sought a rigorous descriptive science of experience. Seeing a tree is an intentional act. I see a tree. Language helps describe the way the tree appears to me. It is phenomenological profile. Comparison. It's very important now. We are comparing now Rorty because we are just zeroing in. Edmund Husserl, agrees language, nothing transcends language. But he's saying it is in acquisition of consciousness. So they're following different routes but agreeing. Rorty differs with them in some aspects, but I'm saying they also concurred. Language is the house of being, as we had heard before. Rorty criticizes Husserl's belief in a pure science of consciousness. For Rorty, there are only vocabularies, no neutral ground of pure experience. They are only vocabularies. Pure science of consciousness, as Husserl puts it, it takes things too high. It's as if the science is the most important thing. Science transcends language. Sometimes if we go that route, we might get lost. Because science is that language has been given signs and symbols, has been algorithmized, if there is such a word. Nothing transcends language, Rorty continues. Now we come to Rorty himself, and I've done about 60 minutes. This is going to be a long one. Richard Rorty in 1931, 2007, he died just a few years ago. Nothing transcends language. Putting it all together, Rorty's main idea: there is no God's eye view outside language. It's like ourselves trying to live outside our skins and still remain to be human beings. He says it is impossible. You can't do that. Language is contingent, historical, cultural. No final vocabulary can capture reality. Reality. Because you see, if you get to reality, it's saying, it's understanding life beyond being. Language, there is no pure language to get us there. Language is an incremental thing. It's societal. It's historical. It goes up to a certain level and it advances. It is infinite. It grows, is dynamic. As humans tax language, it is limitless. That's the beauty of language. It is limitless. You cannot tax it to the max. And still, there will be sharp, rough edges. The knowledge of 2050 will not be perfect. Otherwise, the exploration of all heavenly bodies will be complete. People will, no, you can't. The black hole, the history of science, you know, it is, it's limitless. Philosophy should stop seeking foundations and focus on conversation, creativity, and solidarity. They should stop seeking foundations and correspondence. Oh, it has got to correspond with Western philosophy. It has got to have a foundation and its source from the Greeks. Virtue has got to have a value of the Greeks, so that to be, you know, a reality. He says that's not necessary. So, in a nutshell, I think we have digested this program immensely. And I hope you appreciate. This is your host, Gilbert Githere, saying, ciao for now until we meet again in another session of Mazungumzo.